Hi, Mike William Denny of ThunderShamanism.com, ThunderWizard.com, and AskTheShaman.com. And today we're going to continue in our discussion of the book Shamanism for White People, Reclaiming Our Animist Heritage. And we're going to be talking about myths concerning white people and shamanism. Ooh. So this is probably going to stimulate some raw nerves, and hopefully we'll get some good discussion out of it. But let me talk about some of the myths about that. Now, first we have to acknowledge some of the reality of it. We've got a lot of white people who, in the Western world, who want to connect to a shamanic way of life, shamanic spirituality. It's actually an extremely deep need because we are all born with this need. Our ancestors, no matter where you came from, practiced some form of shamanism, and so it's understandable that people want to connect that way. So what they do, because in our modern Western society, white people don't have a shamanic history anymore. You know, we got rid of that. We walked away from that. And so they don't know where to go. So they go to the traditions that are most familiar to them. And one of the most familiar one is Native American shamanism. So they go in and they just start trying to be Native Americans. And Native Americans, understandably, get very upset because we end up minimizing and offending them. You may not understand why they're offended, but if you look at it, it'll make sense. But trust me, they're not getting upset for no reason. Appropriating somebody else's tradition without understanding it or respecting it, and generalizing it is extremely destructive, not only to them, but the whole history between white people and Native Americans and all that kind of stuff we get into. But it's important that we understand our connection and connect to something that we can make our own and not try. It's destructive for us to pretend to be something or somebody than what we really are. It's destructive to us because it's a form of self-hatred. When you try and be something that you're not, you're actually in this place where you're not connected to your full amount of energy. And there is a middle ground where you can be proud of who you are. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are. If you do have some shame connected to it, you can do some rituals to heal that ancestral shame and connection. There's a way to fix all that. Be who you are, and then still respect and understand and appreciate everybody else's connection. And it doesn't mean you can't go learn from other traditions. But if you don't have a connection to yourself, through your own connection to your own ancestors, it can be difficult. It's not impossible, but it can be difficult. So having said that, some myths about white people and shamanism. Drumming. Now, I get this a lot because I trained with African masters, and I'm considered to be a master of African Yoruba shamanic drumming. And what's interesting is that African people don't have a problem with me doing it. People who have problems with me doing it, African Americans, Native Americans, they see me doing it. They think I'm appropriating. They don't know that I've actually learned and been given permission and all that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is that white people used to use drums in the same way. In fact, there is some historical evidence that there were troops in pre-Christian England, or during the time when Christianity was coming into England. There were groups of Saxon warriors that went around with drums, and they would drum to the gods. And who knows what that tradition was or what that drum sound like, but it was enough of a big deal that the church had to send out a little information to other churches to tell people to stop doing it. And it got taken away. And as a result, white people don't remember that they have a shamanic drumming heritage. You can see it in the Irish drum, the Irish hand drum. That's an old white shamanic practice. You can see that in the Lapland areas of Sweden. Anyway, so that's one myth. White people did use shamanic drumming. It is part of our practice. You can go ahead and pick up a drum and start learning and start drumming and connecting to the spirits with a drum. The flute. Now, I get this a lot because for a while I used to make Native American style flutes. And Native Americans would get very upset about that, some of them, and I can understand why, because again, it's a spiritual appropriation. But what's interesting to know is that the Native American flute, the six-holed flute that people play with that standard um, pentatonic minor scale, is not a Native American scale. It's actually one that was instituted a while ago, um, and now all Native American flutes have that scale. But it's, you know, when you go back before the invention of that, like if you hear some very old recordings of Native American flute players, it doesn't sound anything like that. You know, now Native American flutes sound like shakuhachis, and there's really no difference. You want to play a shakuhachi or a Native American flute, it's going to sound very similar, same tones. Well, here's something interesting to know. 35,000 years ago in Europe, we know this because there's been some excavations in some old caves. And human beings 35,000 years ago would make flutes out of bone. And the flutes had, guess what? A pentatonic scale. The same scale that we use now in Native American flutes. Why do I think this has happened? Why, is it coincidence that modern so-called Native American flutes have this pentatonic minor scale? Well, it's interesting that now we found that the flutes that are found in these caves are similar to that. It's a pentatonic scale. It means that in our DNA we still have that connection to that scale. And white people, they want something connected to their own ancestral connection. So what happens? We have now institutionalized a pentatonic scale, and we've given it to the closest thing that we have to our flute tradition, which is the Native American tradition. You got to understand this. If you want to have the shamanic mindset, you've got to understand that the DNA within us, the ancestral understandings within us, are intuitively going to come out. And we're going to project them onto other cultures. This is why Native American shamanism, neo-shamanism, uses the same techniques that our ancestors used, and the reason why a lot of Native Americans go, what is that? That's got nothing to do with what we do. Because it's our tradition that we're trying to reconnect to. And we're doing the best that we can. You know, our instincts are coming out, and we're trying to connect to what's ever in front of us. It's very important we understand this. It's also very important, you know, for those whose feelings are getting hurt, that you got to let us do what we're doing. We're doing the best that we can. I understand why you're upset, but you know, you got to let us go through it. If you really want us to have our own thing, you got to let us go through our baby steps. And this is one of the ways that it's done. Here's another myth: sweat lodges. Now, Native American sweat lodge practices, you know, they'll tell you, you know, don't do it without permission, don't do it incorrectly, and I completely agree. We've seen problems where so-called, you know, Native American practitioners or some of these New Age guys, like guys that wrote The Secret, you know, they saw themselves as, you know, they're going to take people through sweat lodge ceremonies, and people ended up dying. You know, it's because people weren't respecting the power of that practice and that tradition. But that is not something that's unique to Native Americans. That's why you know, you go to places like Scandinavia, you know, they have steam baths everywhere. Well, it comes from an old practice, an old spiritual tradition of our ancestors as well. So the point is that we can still be doing the same kind of stuff that Native American shamans are doing without having to appropriate Native American, you know, dress or Native American words. We can find it in our own language. And the truth of the matter is, the reason why they're coming up is because it's part of our ancestral heritage. And our ancestors are now coming back around. They're wanting to come out. They're wanting us to connect to the old ways. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but that's enough rambling for today. So if you want more information, you can click on the link below, and you can get the book, Shamanism for White People. And if you want more information about me, you can click on the Thunder Shamanism or the thunderwizard.com link, and you can see all my books and DVDs. If you want to talk to me directly, and you want personal instruction in shamanism or personal rune reading, or if you have any other question, you can click on Ask the Shaman. If you want to support this channel, click on Support This Channel. And that's it for now. I look forward to our next installment.